Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. We are getting started with our second briefing of the Local Governments and Municipal Authorities constituency here in 2026. I'm so glad to be with you today. My name is Ariel Dukovic. I am Head of Communications and Engagement at ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, and I serve as the constituency focal point for the LGMA. So I'm glad to be your moderator today. Also, so excited to welcome a host of familiar and new faces to join us. So we'll talk a little bit about what we'll be going through today. So for our agenda, we have with us a few representatives from COP31, and really great to be able to be with them today and hear a bit more about their priorities and how things are shaping up as we get into the Bonn Climate Talks. That is, of course, the focus of our briefing today to prepare ourselves for these important mid-year talks that will be setting us up for a successful COP31. We are joined by Aaron Kirby from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water from Australia, as well as Neil Kaur, who is Special Advisor to the Climate High-Level Champion designate. Unfortunately, our representative from Turkey from the COP31 presidency was not able to join us today, but we're really happy to have Aaron and Neil with us, and there will be time to ask some questions of them after they speak. Then we're going to get into some specifics with the LGMA. So looking at first what we've been able to accomplish and what we focused on in the first 6 months of this year. We're going to hear from some constituency members who are able to attend the Santa Marta conference on transitioning away from fossil fuels and get a bit more of an insight of what happened there and how it kind of is shaping a different way of multilateral engagement. So very exciting to hear that. Then we're going to hear from UN Habitat on their newest report on the state of urban content in the NDCs. Then we'll be joined by three constituency members who've been leading on three very important thematic areas for us on climate finance, on just transition, and on multi-level governance, and get their perspectives on what to focus on at this SB 64. Finally, I'm going to end with some ways that you can get engaged with us, linking to the SBs, but also more broadly, and then we'll have time for questions as well. I encourage you, I know some housekeeping has come into the chat here. I encourage you to share your questions and thoughts throughout in the chat. We'll be taking a look at those. I have some colleagues on the line also who will answer any questions. But always the question that comes up is, will the recordings be shared and will the slides be available? Yes, both of those will be shared with all registrants afterwards, as well as in our constituency channels so that other folks can get a hold of this information. So with that, I'm going to move things along. Just a bit of background for us. I know there are some folks here joining us who have never been to an LGMA briefing before. I will send some background information. We didn't get to that before the briefing, but some additional background information in case you want to read up on that. But just a bit on the LGMA for those of you who are new. We are really here to create a unified advocacy agenda for subnationals in the UNFCCC process. So this is a way for us to come together and practice collective advocacy to achieve our goals. Additionally, we work in an integrated advocacy approach, so looking to combine diplomacy work with sort of movement building and public legitimacy, again, to achieve our goals. And we're going to hear more about what some of those priorities are today. We collaborate deeply with the COP presidencies. This is always a goal of ours that we are working to really support the COP presidencies to make COPs a success, that we have good relationships with those who are leading in multilateral processes. And this is a way that the constituency can really provide a unique value proposition. And then finally, we of course want to be integrated into this global movement to elevate the action and leadership of subnationals in the climate space, and finding ways to continue to elevate that leadership. So with that, I think it would be good just briefly to touch on what what we know so far in terms of who we're in contact with towards COP31. So of course, the president designate has been identified since the beginning of the year, Murat Kurum from Turkey. Um, the high-level climate action champion also has been active for a few months now, Samed Argibas from the Zero Waste Foundation. We also have had observer focal points identified from Turkey, Professor Birpinar and Dr. Dinkbus. Yeah, we're looking forward to working closely with them. Then, of course, on the Australian side, in this very special year of this joint leadership model, we have Chris Bowen, the Climate Change and Energy Minister from Australia, leading the negotiations. Of course, that has been identified also since the beginning of the year. There is a new youth champion who's been identified. I'm sorry, I don't have her name here. Sally, Erin, you're going to have to come in with that maybe in your update. But she has been identified as well. And then, of course, we have Erin with us today as the stakeholder focal point for Australia. So great to have these contacts identified, especially going into SB 64, because it just makes obviously the continued engagement between the constituency and our various leadership bodies within COP31 much easier. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Erin and to Neil, who are speaking with us today on COP31. I'm going to stop sharing my slides here. And Erin, happy to hand things over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Ariel, and it's a pleasure to be here for this briefing. And of course, I got to please point the audience in the direction of the message I've just put into the chat. Our youth champion, presidency youth champion, is Sally Higgins. She is a farmer from the Australian state of Queensland, and we appointed her as our presidency youth climate champion not too much longer than a month ago. And in that time, she has been to Climate Week in Korea. She was recently at the Copenhagen Climate Ministerial, and she's currently in Nigeria for a consultation with smallholder farmers there as well. So she's already very active, and yes, she has a lot more ahead of her as well, including appearances at Bonn, at the Zero Waste Summit in Turkey, at London Climate Week, and many more places besides. So I wanted to join you this evening because, we've just come through the Copenhagen Climate Ministerial. We are on the road to Bonn. Things are gathering pace. Negotiators on our side are starting to pack their bags. And I thought it was an opportune time to speak a little bit about what is emerging as a really central part of the COP31 agenda, and that is the electrification agenda. Another thing, actually, while I'm at it, I might as well just drop in the chat here, is a speech from my minister, Chris Bowen, President of Negotiations, who gives a little colour to our electrification agenda. I'll just quote briefly from that speech. As he has said recently at the Copenhagen Climate Ministerial, electrification is gaining momentum across the world, and adoption rates, in particular for electrical vehicles, rising. Last year, electric vehicles sales globally rose to more than 20%, and 1 in 4 cars sold now are electric. And we're seeing that same trend in Australia. Australians went from buying roughly 1 EV every 50 minutes just 4 years ago to buying one every 3 minutes in this April just gone. And that flow of $2.3 trillion to clean energy globally last year tells us that markets agree with that trend. So that's a quick snippet on electrification from Minister Bowen. And of course, for this constituency, that trend in electric vehicles sales is a very powerful and important one as well. So obviously, it's something that got a bit of play at Copenhagen, and I'll speak a little bit about it tonight. The COP31 clean energy priority is very simple. It's about electrifying the economy, backed by grids, energy storage, and investment. And this is really a joint ticket between the presidencies. Turkey has already publicly identified electrification as a key COP31 priority for them as well, with Minister Karun advocating for a truly global conversation on the role of electrification in supporting the transition away from fossil fuels. We've heard loud and clear from parties that electrification, backed by grids and storage, is a cost-effective way to boost energy security, expand energy access, and cut emissions. And in today's uncertain world, and amidst the current energy crisis, electrification isn't just climate action, it's smart economic development and security policy. So electrification and energy transition should be at the centre, we consider, of energy security discussions. It cuts across all sectors, including transport, industry, buildings. It's already delivering lower costs, stronger resilience, and tangible benefits for communities. It improves energy access, creates new industrial opportunities, improves health outcomes, and supports economic development for communities around the globe. And as I said, for this constituency, there are obvious benefits to electrification: cleaner cities, healthier air, reduced noise pollution, enhanced energy resilience. I also want to pull out some analysis that the IEA and ARENA recently released, showing that electricity really needs to make up about 35% of final energy use by 2035 if we're going to stay on track to 1.5 degrees. On our current trajectory, we are only heading for about 26% by 2035. So there is a real need to convene investors and governments globally around finding ways to accelerate that energy transition. A focus on electrification, grids and storage at this COP is going to strengthen our collective ability to deliver on the COP28 goals that we agreed back in Dubai through the Global Stocktaker, which I was very proud to play a part, to double energy efficiency and triple renewable energy capacity worldwide. And that paves the way for strong outcomes at the second GST as well. It delivers a demand signal to attract investment into grids and storage as critical enablers of the transition, supporting renewable integration and energy efficiency. The economics of that transition are clear. As I said, $2.3 trillion flowed into clean energy last year, and markets are backing it. Investment's critical, and there's a real opportunity to accelerate progress on the road to COP31. We're really seeking views from constituencies, from parties, on what signals would boost investor confidence from COP31 and keep that capital flowing. In terms of the practical and concrete outcomes we're looking for at COP31, we're considering a lot of options, including plurilateral declarations, practical initiatives to support implementation, and new analysis to grow the global evidence base as well. Something we really found at the Petersburg Climate Dialogue recently is there is really broad interest in this agenda. As I've just sort of indicated, there are so many elements and so many aspects to this that really show why electrification is really a no-brainer and has substantial economic security benefits, even setting aside the climate benefits of that initiative. So I might pause there. I'm happy to take any questions or listen to comments, but suffice it to say, we are really looking forward to working through the electrification agenda over the course of the next year.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for those insights into your priorities. I think, yes, that was definitely also the message I heard out of Petersburg as well, that this agenda will be well received at COP31. So, and I think you've now assigned us some homework for responding to that. So thank you. I will have a look for questions in our chat, but maybe while, since we've set aside time for questions after Neil, why don't we turn things over to Neil here for a perspective from the high-level champions side of things, and then we'll have a look at the questions. So thank you, Aaron and Neil. on to you. Oh, maybe Neil, let me introduce you actually fully. Sorry. So Neil is with us today as special advisor to the Climate High Level Champion designate and advisor to the President of the United Nations Habitat Assembly. So you're going from kind of one intense event at WOOF to another. So please, love to hear your insights as you go through these different milestones.
Thank you very much, Ariel, and thank you, colleagues, for your kind attention. So, like Ariel mentioned, for the champion, I think it has been a very remarkable journey in the last few months since his appointment. And for us, I think it has been from Yezu to heading towards Bonn. So in that context, I just wanted to share some observations and also some of the key topics that he would like to focus on. So firstly, Ariel and to Aaron, it was a pleasure to meet Sally in Korea. And you'll be glad to know that we'll be hosting her here at the Zero Waste Forum in a couple of in a less than a week's time. And so it's been really good to have that opportunity to meet with her. Ariel, as you rightly mentioned, I was just at the World Urban Forum and working with the local government networks, including ICLE, to make sure that we position localization of the climate agenda well there. I think you will find that in the Baku call to action, I think item 4 really highlights the role of local governments in the implementation of the climate agenda and under the focus of resilient cities. It's also been wonderful to work with colleagues to shape and develop the Cities Day event at the Zero Waste Forum, which will be on the 6th of June. Yunus, I thank you also to you and your guidance and colleagues in ICLE for having that. We will also have opportunities outside the the Cities Day for the LGMA to have a site meeting on the sidelines. So I'm in touch with Anna, Ariel, to arrange for the logistics for that. You'll be glad to know that we are also looking forward to hosting the Marrakesh Partnership at the forum to mainstream zero waste, both as a principle and as a implementation concept for the climate agenda during the Marrakesh Partnership meeting here in Istanbul. So if you need any key documents, etc., we will be very happy to share with you. I think the concept note is being finalized together with the presidency, and we will be sharing that with everyone maybe on Friday or I mean tomorrow or at the latest by Monday. This brings us to Bonn. Colleagues, it's my first time, so I've not not been to this process. So we'll need your help and guidance as much as possible. I do know that there will be a focus on subnationals and health as one key area in Bonn. There will also be looking at localization and finance and capacity. You'll be glad to know that at the forum itself, there will be a panel dedicated to for local governments to look at capacity, finance, and financing. And then, of course, we head to London Climate Action Week, where I'm not going to go in because there's tons of activities there. And you know, and colleagues, you know that there will also be a meeting in Tangiers, the UCLG World Congress, where I think the champion has been invited, and we'll probably have a side event focusing on zero waste finance and African cities in that context. So that's all from our side, and look forward to hosting some of you when you come to Istanbul next week, including Sally Higgins. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Looking forward to being in Istanbul for sure for this event. And all these connections to the climate agenda, of course, are very important. Um, And we do have some time for questions now, and there was one in the chat. Aaron, okay, if I ask you this one live, which was sorry, are you hoping to land the outcomes on electrification in the negotiations and or in the action agenda? So where are you focusing your priorities there?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ariel. Of course, we're looking for strong outcomes on electrification anywhere we can get them. Of course, on the negotiating agenda, like we're really led by parties' preferences in terms of, if or how that manifests in the negotiating agenda. So we'd be really in listening mode for preferences there. But you can achieve strong outcomes on this in all kinds of places in the COP process.
Great. Great. So I don't see any other questions. So we'll move on with our agenda. And Neil and Aaron, if you can stick around, great. Otherwise, thank you for your contributions. And we look forward to connecting with you at these events coming up in the next few weeks and months. So yeah, with that, we're going to move on to a little more of an inward focus now. So turning our attention to the LGMA constituencies, sort of priorities for the first half of this year. First up, let me share my screen again. I'm joined by my colleague Eunice Arikan, who has been serving for the last 6 months as the co-chair of the LGMA Steering Committee. And one of the innovations that we have brought to the governance of the LGMA, besides the steering committee sort of collaborative governance model, is a rotating co-chair position. So right now it's being held by ICLEI and the Committee of the Regions. And the representatives from the steering committee basically serve as the co-chair for a 6-month period. So their term will end with the SBs next month. And this is really great for me personally as the constituency focal point to have kind of leadership and support within the steering committee where we can kind of work together as more of a sounding board first and then bring proposals to the wider steering committee and of course to the broader constituency as well. So this model has been working so far. So with that, this morning, I'm joined by Eunice. In the afternoon, Teresa Perez from the Committee of the Regions will join us. So yes, some different voices. And again, Eunice, I'll turn things over to you and you can just tell me when you want me to advance the slides.
Thank you, Ariel, dear colleagues, all the guests and attendees. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Ariel, for the sake of time, let's immediately go to the slides because we will try to start with what collectively we have achieved over this first 6 months, and then I will go a bit more in the event by event with some highlights, and obviously not to take too much time. Indeed, we have really gone through this transition. The steering committee has been established, and we have started our working groups. We have already started onboarding their work. There will be more calls for expressions of interest to join those. And we will have now continue with our communication channels. And this second virtual briefing is also part of that. In terms of our substantial progress that we have started our planning for a 2-year strategy. So we're not just focusing on 1 year phase, but also towards COP32. So it's for us at least a 2-year cycle. We have now introduced a very innovative tracking system. Thanks, Ariel, to your leadership. For people like me, old school people like me, it is really a challenge, but I'm sure the steering committee members will definitely benefit from your support and service in this era of technologies, digital opportunities. We will be focusing more on finance, multi-level, and just transition. Our colleagues will inform me about Chant that LGMA has been also involved actively. And then now let me go through some highlights of the past 6 months. Let's go to the next slide. As you have heard from Aaron and Neil, there has been already numerous engagements. I will not repeat all of them, but this is, for example, an overview. So let's remember, we are not only following the UN or President's agendas, we have our own climate weeks, the ones that we lead or the ones that UNFCCC leads. There are also LGMA or Global Task Force-led events, and of course, there are also processes outside the UNFCCC as well. So let's go to this. You will see that especially June will be very heavy. We also know there will be some things will be shaping up in the coming weeks and months. Therefore, this calendar will be updated as appropriate. But obviously, the last 3 months were particularly very concrete because, as you have heard, presidency have shaped their agendas, consultations have taken place. So we are now aware of where we are going or how are we advancing towards to. So let's go to this, some highlights. Ariel, if you go to the last 3 slides. So our Global Task Force Barcelona retreat was really helpful for us to understand where the UNFCCC agenda or climate agenda fits in the overall UN reform process or UN agendas. We have participated in a 2-day workshop that was really an innovation from the UNFCCC Secretariat with all the constituencies. Ariel and I were there on behalf of LGMA. This is innovative because the last time such a meeting was held was in 2010, which means after the Copenhagen shipwreck, you can imagine. So it is indeed a response to the questions that after the NDCs 3.0, climate governance is entering into a new phase, and the engagement mechanisms, including the constituency-based engagement to the negotiations, but action agenda engagement, you all are aware. We have Global Implementation Accelerator. We have some new tracks, tiers that you will hear from Santa Marta. So the constituency process should also be improved. There are internal challenges. There are dialogues within the constituencies with the Secretariat. I think this was a frank discussion, and I think it will be helpful for us to move forward. It's not over. Definitely, you will hear more. There are action items that we have to participate and improve that the voice of subnationals are appropriately reflected in this process. Retrospect, I will not go through it. Ariel was there. It was the first ever dialogue with the presidency in person. It was followed by the Copenhagen. So there was a continuity on that front. We have participated this for focal point dialogue with the presidency, where we have exchanged some questions, and then, as you heard from Neil, our possibility to engage with them was thanks to this dialogue, continuous dialogue with this kind of channels that we have been receiving. You may be aware the presidency has also updated their website, their host country web pages are now up and running, so that we can have more information, including some announcements I will share later on. YOSU was important. There were several events, mandated events, but it was a good opportunity to meet with the champion. And we also had a city-specific summit with cities and regions, the YOSU and the region of YOSU, together with other partners. There was several events that were outside the mandated events, but this was collectively as a mobilization, especially towards the Asian hemisphere, because participation is usually more regional specific on that front, but there were a lot of global partners as well. In May, we were in Ankara and Hatay through Ariel, our focal point, as well as Gökçen Şahin from the European Secretariat, particularly bilateral with the COP31 presidency, Ministry of Urbanization, Tuğba Dinçbaş, and others, as well as the Zero Waste Foundation, EU officials. This was really a good opportunity for us to understand each other, especially on our advocacy position, what we want to achieve. It was followed by the Hatay Resident Cities Forum, where Gökçen has represented us as CLE and LGMA. It was an important meeting because it was the concretization of what the presidency wants to achieve on urbanization. And we are very happy that the declaration has, for the first time ever, a reference to multi-level in the vision of the urban integrating cities into the process, cities and regions, hopefully, in the process. So this is giving us the chance that our messages are conveyed and it has been processed. We will see how this will reflect into the negotiation document in the coming days. Last slide, Ariel. The next one, exactly. So Over the past couple of weeks, we have also heard presidents have announced that they have opened up their 10 thematic priorities. It was 9, then on the last day it was increased to 10. The participants or all partners were able to submit their views. As of today, we don't know which of the LGMA partners have submitted which views. We could have an internal discussion on that. We know at least ICLE have submitted views. The important is that now the presidency is digesting this or consolidating all this feedback. It was an online platform so that everyone was able to submit their views. So the final version of the COP31 action agenda will be announced on the 9th of June in Bonn as part of the UNFCCC 64. Copenhagen, as you heard, our colleague from C40, Michael Schroeder was there, and they already had also additional discussions with the presidency's team. As Neil mentioned, we were in WUF 13. WUF is not a negotiation session, but yes, there was a Baku call to action of all the partners, but there were specific sessions. One of them was the Baku Continuity Coalition. And there, we are trying to make sure that Baku Continuity Coalition initiative is also aligned with other initiatives like CHAMP and others. And we were very happy. Ambassador da Costa from Brazil was there, among other speakers. LGMA voice was represented by Rodrigo Perpetuo, Regional Director for South America. Obviously, there were some other events, but this was an important highlight for us. And you have seen there is a number of events. Yes, Istanbul Zero Waste Forum will be an important moment. On the same dates, similar dates, there is also Civil Voices Festival where UNFCCC constituencies will be meeting in Ankara with their Turkish counterparts. We will be in Bonn, intensive agenda with the UNFCCC, but their cities. We know there will be some meetings of the CHAMP as well. London Climate Action Week and Innovate for Cities and UCLG World Congress in Tangier. So obviously, as we said, June is the most busiest. June will be the busiest month of the year, and we believe the outcomes will help us to prepare for the last 100 days of COP31, which will be starting around August onwards. With this, Ariel, I would like to give the floor, and through this opportunity, on behalf of myself, I'd like to express my really pleasure to engage with the LGMA Steering Committee in my capacity as the co-chair on behalf of ICLE. This is concluding, and in the next couple of weeks, we will be announcing who will be the next co-chairs of the LGMA constituency in the Q3, Q4 of 2026. I am delighted to take this journey, and it was a unique experience, and I would like to wish the best the rest of the term and the other steering committee members. Ariel, if there's any question, I'm ready to help to respond in the call as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Yunus. Thanks for all of those wonderful insights and updates. So with that, we're actually ahead of time here. So thank you for keeping on track, everyone. And I see that Leah also will give us some updates from the Baku Continuity Coalition event as well. So thanks for that, Leah. So we can move on now. And of course, I'm looking in the chat for questions, but I don't see anything right now. So we'll move on to our next speaker. Toby Walker is here from the Under 2 Coalition, joining us one last time. Thank you, Toby, for being here. And he's going to give us some reflections from his experience at Santa Marta on the Transition Away from Fossil Fuels Conference and what came out of there. So go ahead, Toby. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariel. Pleasure to be here and joining all the other esteemed speakers. So yeah, I was in Santa Marta along with a few other colleagues that were online and a number of our governments as well just last month. And I think really the key thing to get across about the Santa Marta conference, which was the first ever international conference on fossil fuel phase out that was hosted by the government of Colombia and the Kingdom of Netherlands, was I think it's an embodiment of this new two-tier multilateralism that the COP30 Brazil presidency introduced in their letters. We, of course, have the incredibly important process in the UNFCCC that is unfolding as we speak with the global fossil fuel and deforestation roadmap process. And the strength and the vital importance of that process is that all 198 countries are able to feed in, share their perspectives, and it's that inclusive conversation. But what was happening in Santa Marta was the second tier of this international cooperation, where a smaller group of countries were getting together. It was just under 60 national governments. And these are the coalition of the willing, if you like, or the ones that are more engaged, ready to go a bit further, a bit faster on addressing the single biggest driver of climate change. And of course, there's a huge role for subnationals in both of those conversations. And I think the main takeaway from us on the ground was just the energy in the room in Santa Marta as well. We had our subnational chapter leading up to the two high level days that were mainly for national governments, but also for subnationals. And truly across each of those days, there was positivity in every conversation. There was energy in every speech. There was a palpable feeling that there was a commitment to go further and faster. And I think if there's one thing I want to leave everyone on the call with today is some of that energy. And I think it's really important for us all to bring that into the different spaces that we now operate in on whatever topic that is. To maybe dig into the subnational chapter a bit more, and it was fantastic to collaborate with colleagues at C40 and ICLEI throughout this process. But really, we had three core events. And so the first one was to bring our subnational leaders that were in Santa Marta together with parliamentarians, which was a really interesting collaboration, as both stakeholders represent the people so front and center in their work, and they do so when engaging with the national government. And so despite us having, I think it was around 20 countries represented with about 22 people in that conversation, everyone brought their interventions and their perspective back to that perspective of people. And so I think that's a really key takeaway for our work in different spaces of what else can we do actually with bringing these two together, because they clearly share so much in terms of how to go about driving legislative or enabling framework change and operating in that national framework that they sit in. The second event was just for our subnational leaders. We had 11 on the ground, 8 states and regions and 3 cities, and to do so with technical experts. So to dig a bit more into the specific pain points that subnationals are facing, whether that be across reducing demand, reducing the supply and production of fossil fuels, or just trying to navigate ways to move away from the dependency on fossil fuels. And that dependency word is something that kept coming up when we were engaging stakeholders throughout this process. And then the final one was a panel where we had California, Quebec, the Nigerian national government talk about means to phase out fossil fuel production, followed by an event where we had also Rio Grande do Sul and the prefect from Ushuaia in Ecuador talk about diversifying their local economy. So, okay, they're not producing fossil fuels, but they do import lots. So what can they do domestically to diversify how they get their energy sources in different sectors? And Aaron was right to touch upon electrification here as a key means, because there's so much already happening, that how can we scale this across subnationals? And these were some of the points that were discussed. I know that 11 number is really so much effort was put into getting that there, but even more importantly is the nearly 100 we had engaged virtually, and that is a huge number of subnationals that are engaging on what can really be quite a political and contentious topic, and so that's a big kudos to everyone in the respective organizations that was doing so. And there's a huge momentum there to build on as well as this work evolves. And likewise, that was matched with the media attention that we found on the ground for the subnational leaders that were present. I think in terms of the content, one thing to build upon was that it wasn't just subnationals talking about the local agenda across Santa Marta. A number of the national governments brought it back to the local angle, because they really see that dependency and diversification angle is about building out that bottom up and local alternatives to this. And that doesn't just mean renewable energy, but it means equipping those local stakeholders with means to navigate the tension that's being faced. And I think one that really stood out for myself was on the session about managed decline of fossil fuel assets. The Vietnamese minister intervened, and he said we had no part to play in this, but in one of our major coal producing regions, they were phasing out their supply and building up decentralized solar panels just because they were responding to the local realities on the ground. And the coal was becoming too expensive, and it was creating a huge number of health issues in their local region. And so that's why they were shutting it down and taking that on purely by themselves. And that responding to the pressures faced on the local ground is really something that just kept coming up and over again. So I do think there's a really strong position for us to play as a community to meet that conversation where it is and see how we can evolve it to go even further. The final thing to say about comparing maybe the Santa Marta process with the UNFCCC one is just how inclusive it was from the get-go in terms of incorporating our perspective for how we shape the agenda for subnationals. Together with ICNI and C40, I think we had around 12 meetings with the government of Colombia and Netherlands in the run-up, with some hiccups here and there for sure, but that's really something to recognize, because that is a very inclusive process, very iterative, wanting to really shape what this looks like with us from the get-go. And the next conference will be in 2027 and hosted by Ireland and Tuvalu. And I think we need to bring those learnings into the next iteration, but ensure we push for that same inclusive process. And there's sort of less fighting for our voice already in this space. So it's more about what we want to say in the room as opposed to trying to get in the room, which is an important thing to acknowledge. And I think this picture on the bottom right shows this quite nicely as well. Instead of big negotiating rooms where everyone's sharing their perspective, they had very targeted small breakout conversations. This one in the bottom right was chaired by the Nigerian Minister for Energy, with around another 15 national government ministers in the room, but also a subnational leader representative and a few other key stakeholders as well. And it was very much a open dialogue that was moving around, which was bringing in different insights and really sharing those perspectives in that Chatham House frank technical exchange format, which was quite a refreshing space to see, and also led to people getting to the point on how we address these issues. And I think the real test now is how we see how that conversation is taken forward, but it's the start of something, and that is really worth celebrating. A few other final points to just touch upon in terms of how this process will now evolve is there was a number of different outcomes which I can share in the chat if people are interested more, but I think the ones to focus on is that there will be a committee introduced to steer this process, so the handover from Colombia and Netherlands to Ireland and Tuvalu. And I think it's really important for us that we ensure there's a subnational representative on that committee, so that the process is steered from our voice in a coherent fashion. There was a lot of talk on the subsidy angle, so the fossil fuel subsidies, and just better acknowledging and improving data on just how much money is going to subsidize fossil fuels. And that's not just at the national level, but how that is localized as well. And so there's a huge role for us to play in supporting that process and bringing subnational public budget into some of that analysis. And then I mentioned the dependency word, but again, there's a huge amount to do in terms of showing clear pathways away from dependency at the local level. And I think this quote from Minister René Velez in the bottom there underpins some of what I mean by that, where she closed our third event, the subnational chapter, by saying that multilateralism has too often hidden behind national agendas, avoiding the hard work of implementers. Bringing subnational governments into technical discussions in Santa Marta changed that. It is a step towards bridging international ambition with local delivery. And so I will end it there, and I think there's definitely more work to do, but thank you, Ariel, for providing us the space, and also to the great collaboration in making Santa Marta what it was with yourself and C40 and others.
Amazing. Thank you, Toby. Really, really interesting insights there. Maybe can I ask kind of a tough question, but just one that has been sort of on my mind as we hear of kind of these, well, first the sort of the theory of the two levels of multilateralism. It you know the efforts that went into making Santa Marta what it was huge and shouldn't be underestimated, I think. And it's really good to hear that the outcomes were so strong and that there's so much that we can build on from there and take both to the next conference and also into COP. And I hear lots of connections with what Aaron was talking about and maybe ways into for us as the subnational community. But was there any discussion about kind of maybe not fatigue, the possibility, and it sounds like there was energy in the actual room, but what does it do for the rest of the process or for other processes maybe where, really the we heard, I think in Petersburg, people talking about fatigue of negotiators, of really fragmentation. Yeah, was there any discussion there? Was it really on just sort of focusing on, well, this is a successful platform that we've created here, and so let's revel in that rather than thinking of any risks?
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. And that one of the breakout, actually, I think two of the breakout sessions were specifically on international cooperation and the governance of climate diplomacy.
Mm,
And so it was getting exactly to the point of what you're just saying. And second to that, in the more open floor format, I would say, like as a rough percentage, 30% of national governments, when they intervened, did reiterate the importance of UNFCCC and the
mhm,
importance of connecting what's being discussed here to what's happening in the UNFCCC. So I really don't think it was this is an alternative. It was a more how can we bring what we're doing here into that space to strengthen it.
mhm,
And there were a number of ideas floated, but I think the key one that's happening already as we speak is that there's going to be a summary report from Colombian and Netherlands governments that will be handed over to the COP presidencies and UNFCCC secretariat. And that will feed into the COP30 fossil fuel roadmap process. And I know there will be an event on that in Bonn. So that's just one touch point. But I do know that all of these governments are really thinking about how else we can bring it in ways to strengthen. But there is also the need to completely separate them apart. Like bringing
mhm,
them too close will then end up in the same situation we're in, right?
right.
Um, and I think something that stuck out in the breakout session that I mentioned was just the need to give this time. I think someone made the example that the Powering Past Coal initiative started obviously outside of the UN process. It grew, it got momentum, and then coal use in electricity generation started declining for 8 years. And then in the UNFCCC, they had an agreement to phase out coal. And so I think that's just maybe one type of example of how this process outside can demonstrate that we're making the speed, and then it comes in to the negotiations. And whether that's the right way or not is above my pay grade. But I think an important example to keep in mind, and that was something that was discussed a lot. But very much everyone was reiterating their commitment and the importance of the UN process. It wasn't about creating a new space.
Mhm, mhm. Great. Well, thank you very much again for all of your hard work on this. I know you also personally put a lot into this, so I'm glad that the outcomes were so strong. Okay, with that, I'm going to move us on to our next guest, and that is Leah Ronalder from Climate Change and Urban Environment at UN Habitat. Welcome, Leah. Wonderful to have you with us. And I've got your slides, so feel free to just tell me when to advance.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And actually, it's perfect that I get to speak after Toby, because I can share some of that positivity from Santa Marta and turn it into real numbers that we're also seeing in the NDCs. So you're just giving me the perfect, so to say, you're serving me the opportunity on a silver platter. So thanks so much. And thank you, everybody, and thanks for having me here. Just want to confirm, can you hear me okay? Because I've been having some internet issues. Does this sound fine?
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to offer another exciting opportunity, and I think a shift that from our side has been an absolutely phenomenal movement into the right direction. So I guess many of you know that we've been looking into the NDCs already for several years in collaboration with many partners. And we've been now looking into where do cities stand in the NDCs 3.0. So, I mean, there's around about 140-ish NDCs 3.0 that have been submitted by April. So we looked into how are cities anchored into them, in them. And if you go to the next slide, I think the data speaks for itself. A couple of years ago, I have been dreaming about that every single NDC 3.0 has cities anchored in them. And I think I'm quite close to my dream. So about 80% of the NDCs include well-developed urban content. What does that mean? That they're identifying what are the climate risks that cities are experiencing? What are the challenges that might be existing when it comes to climate-related challenges that might be existing, but also challenges in delivering? And what are the specific actions that are needed to work in cities and with cities across sectors? And then how do we actually now deliver on all of this? So a massive positive shift that we've been seeing from around 49% in NDCs 2.0 to now 80% in NDCs 3.0. So the title of the report is that cities are at the center of NDCs 3.0, and I think that statement is getting increasingly true. So a positive shift. So if you go to the next slide, please, is to say this is a little bit, it's a bit of a complicated figure, but what I want to say with this is we are seeing that cities or urban issues are not just sprinkled left or right in our reports. It's it's not just okay, as you sometimes see in the negotiation documents, that it's a half sentence somewhere. No, we are really seeing that it's being made a priority. So about half of the NDCs are specifically lining out in at least 3 sectors how cities can contribute to making, turning this into reality on the ground in cities and with cities. So we're seeing that specifically happening in transport, in energy, in waste, and in water and infrastructure. So meaning that, NDCs are lining out, this is where delivery in cities with cities needs to happen. So I think that's a quite promising development. And Toby, to your part of the quote that you shared in the end, that national, energy shouldn't be a national topic only. Over half of the NDCs are referring to the role of cities in the energy sector, which I personally thought was a quite positive and surprising development. So if you now see this figure with that shift and that figure, what we mean with it is we're seeing specific actions being lined out in the NDCs by more actions, but also more countries mentioning the actions. So really seeing that shift from NDCs 2.0 to NDCs 3.0 as a positive movement. If you go to the next slide, we've also, of course, housing being at the heart of our strategic plan. We looked into how our housing and informal settlements being anchored in the NDCs. And one thing that was a positive finding is that housing is really one area where it's made specifically about delivering for people and improving people's lives. So, we often get the questions, okay, well, NDC is great, cool policy document, but what does that now actually mean for people? And the housing sector is one where the connection between we need to improve people's life is made very, very specific. So just shy of half of the NDCs include housing and informal settlements. Not surprisingly, that's often in least developed countries mentioned. And what is great is that here we dug a bit deeper and we're seeing that where housing is mentioned, it's often mentioned in relation to we need not just sustainable, but also affordable and safe housing. Housing needs to be resilient to disasters. It needs to be sustainable and low carbon, but housing also needs to be thought on in a bit wider range. So linking with better infrastructure, drainage system, energy access, transport networks, waste management, for example. Really breaking it down, what it would mean for people specifically. And now, as I think almost last slide, Ariel, if you move to the next one, because I know this is of interest to the constituency here, is how is multi-level governance mentioned in the NDCs? So we looked into multi-level governance and capacity building as two coins, two sides of one coin. And this is really the most significant shift that we've been seeing between NDCs 2.0 and NDCs 3.0, the mentioning and inclusion of the importance of multi-level governance and capacity building has really moved to the heart of the NDCs. So we're seeing here specific talk about vertical coordination and the importance of coordinating between different levels of governance and the importance of training and skill development, strengthening and technical assistance, legal and regulatory framework, and the importance of multi-level partnerships. We also looked into how do CHAMP signatory countries map in comparison to non-signatory countries. One of the big findings, or the two big findings, have been in terms of mentioning cities, they're more or less the same. But what is really different for CHAMP endorsing countries is that they have specific or more stronger commitments to multi-level governance, and specifically highlighting the importance of vertical coordination in their NDCs 3.0. And with that, I think that's now just two short calls to action. I mean, there's of course about 50 NDCs that still remain to be submitted. We are, of course, hoping that every country that is currently still in gray will also put cities at the center. We've been working with multiple countries to make that a reality, but here to support on NDC finalization in case that's of interest. But also we've started to now work on NDC implementation and talking with member states. Okay, now you've put that into your NDCs. What do we need to do, and how can we work together to make this a reality, and identify the projects and programs on the ground to work in cities with cities and turning NDCs 3.0 dream into a reality that also improves people's lives. And I think with that, on the last slide, just an overview of what you will find in this report. It's a couple of deep dives. We have country case studies looking into the different country scores, but also global trends, regional breakdowns, and so on. So just also a big thank you to everybody here. I know that many of the partners here have contributed to this. If there's any specific interest on some of the data, we can easily pull that out in terms of country fact sheets to support some of your work. If there's a specific interest on some of the topics and sectors, that's all data that can be produced quite easily. And we're also hoping to turn this all into a big platform where everybody can just browse and identify some of these opportunities and links. That's it. Aria, back to you. On that one, I'm happy to elaborate a bit on Wolf and Baku Continuity Coalition, but I think I'll leave it for now here.
Okay, great. Yeah, maybe we can come back to that if there's time. And thank you very much for that update. That is great. And I think this really gives us so much fuel for our fire for positioning us ahead of COP31. So really great to dig in there and draw from that as we're talking to parties and leadership in the future. So I did want to just mention one comment I see in the chat. It would be interesting from a research perspective why the remaining 20% of countries do not have subnational components in their strategies, to understand why they don't. So I don't know if that's been discussed at all, but yeah, kind of unpacking that, whether it's politics or administrative constraints or capacity, et cetera. So, and I see there that Erin is going to leave us. So thank you so much, Erin, again, for your contributions this evening for you. Okay, so moving on now, I think we will start to speed up a bit here now. Carlos, I'm excited to have you on board here to open us up for our LGMA priorities at SB 64. We're going to be focusing with you first on climate finance. So Carlos is here from FMDV, the Global Fund for Cities Development, and of course he serves on our steering committee of the LGMA and is the co-lead of the LGMA Climate Finance Working Group with the City of Buenos Aires. So, Carlos, I turn things over to you.
Thank you, Ariel. Can you hear me well?
Yes, wonderful.
Perfect. So I'll try to be fast, even though climate finance is always very complex in the negotiations. Just to say that for the priority messaging, we have two main work streams within the negotiations. Now the Veredas dialogue and the climate finance work program that both come from COP30 decisions. So basically on the COP30 LGMA positioning, we are still very much aligned. There's not much to add, but more to adapt to the format of these dialogues. The climate finance work program is more on the, let's say, the volumes, the delivery of climate finance, the access modalities, etc. And the Veredas dialogue is more about aligning the financial architecture, the global financial architecture to the Paris Agreement goals. So in both agendas, we have something to say, something to add, and something to ask. Basically, on the Article 9, so on the climate finance work program, the obligations of public finance should be protected in terms of volumes, in terms of contribution. So this is a very much aligned agenda with the national governments. We need a delivery architecture that is strengthened, meaning that the reform of the global financial agenda and architecture needs to include formulas that are helping local and regional governments access to climate finance. And we especially have in the positioning of the LGMA last year, the financial intermediation through national and subnational development banks, which is a key component, urban inclusive country platforms, the access to territorial level of action. We have the very important example of the locally led climate action guidelines that were published just before COP by the GCF, which now open new opportunities for grant funding, for implementing the processes, the readiness processes for that national, subnational climate finance joint agenda and strategy. This is very key, and I think it will be core to the future of our exchanges with the COP presidency and the high-level champions. And of course, tracking the flows where implementation happens, meaning at the local level, it is very important to get dedicated indicators, dedicated data, especially from the Standing Committee on Finance, to make sure that we can measure and report and track. And I think it's very well aligned with what Leah just presented in terms of what the trend is for the NDCs. So we will test, and it is something that we will develop with the working group on climate finance, an ask for a synthesis report on multi-level climate finance that would echo the Baku to Belém roadmap, and maybe a high-level champion supported compact or campaign on multi-level climate finance delivery package. I think that what we have seen from COP30 to COP31 is that the dialogue, the conversation is moving from volumes to delivery mechanism. It's more, everything is more about implementation now. And this is the moment to copy paste the processes that go within the national conversations to the subnational ones and get the basis for going further and showcasing that the first partners of the national governments are the local and regional governments. And this is echoing also, of course, the IPCC report that will come after COP31, but just preparing COP32, of course, this is an important ask. And of course, we will use the 30 by 30, 30% of climate finance flows going to the subnational level of action by 2030 as a political benchmark, a mobilizing tool and implementation indicator, and especially a proposition to have a specific subnational investment annex into the NDCs, the NAPs, and the NBSAPs. This is very important to give visibility to that segment, and this is also something that probably Lea and UN Habitat and partners will explore better in the segments of the urban climate finance within the NDCs. So basically, what we are building on COP30 again, the GCF locally led climate action, which is a very strong signal from the somehow and not to be quoted in front of the GCF, but somehow the most bureaucratic climate fund globally. This is a very strong indication that communities and local and regional governments, the local level of action is key to the implementation of the Paris Agreement and opening a framework, a guide for national governments that are willing to decentralize that climate finance in a process that serves both the national ministries of environment, climate, urban development, that are often very weak in the national governments in terms of budget allocation and capacities, but also the national associations of mayors and governors, the financial institutions that are serving the decentralization processes. So all of this framed into a cohesive process. So the Veredas dialogue, the work plan is now public. There will be a meeting at the SB on the 9th and 10th of June. The Chingu Finance talks are listed for October to be confirmed. The co-chairs of the Climate Finance Working Group have been appointed. So we will be waiting for the detailed work plan. The idea, of course, is to, in the Veredas dialogue, make sure that they recognize localization as a condition for the financial alignment. And for the climate finance working program to turn that recognition into access modalities. So this is the key component of our advocacy and push that we will define better after SB, following the signals that we will get from the different partners and national governments. I think that's it for now. If there are more questions, of course, happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Thanks for that very comprehensive review. Maybe very quickly, from how things are shaping up, who do you think is one of the parties that will be key to our success as we go into SB64? Who are you looking at right now?
You mean Turkey?
That's an obvious one, maybe, but yeah, okay, I'll take it.
I think that our objective so far is to get closer conversations with the different negotiating groups like the G77, AOCs, LDCs. These are very key to put the pressure and make sure that they also integrate better the recognition of the fact that supporting local and regional governments access to climate finance is on top of whatever the country can get from the donors, from the multilateral system. So this is very key in that conversation to make sure that now that we are more mature in that debate and the Santa Marta signals are also very converging on this, that we can work together to get more out of the system. And we have innovations, we have ways to support national governments in doing so.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, lots of connections, of course, to our next topic, which is the implementation of the just transition. So I'm going to turn things over to Marta Stenzel, who's coming to us from C40 Cities, but also is now recently appointed as lead of the LGMA Just Transition Working Group, and of course has been leading this work for LGMA in the past years as well. So thank you, Marta, for being with us today, and excited to hear your priorities for SB 64.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Lovely to see everyone. And as Ariel mentioned, on the C40 side, on behalf of the LGMA, we have been engaging with the UNFCCC Just Transition Work Program for over a couple of years now, of course, in close collaboration with a number of key partners in this constituency. And our collective goal was really to highlight the critical role that subnational governments play as just transition implementers. And that is from, addressing energy poverty to supporting informal waste workers and improving their working conditions to localizing and engaging in social dialogue with workers on the ground. And like Toby before very eloquently put, subnational governments, they have unique understanding of the local realities, dynamics, vulnerabilities. And of course, they have powers to drive good green jobs, to drive inclusive skills, opportunities, and programs, especially for marginalized communities. And that really makes them key partners for national governments in terms of translating the high-level just transition strategies into tangible outcomes for local communities. And this point has been very positively taken by many of the parties we've been engaging with throughout the Just Transition Work Program dialogues. And of course, there's already a number of parties that already embed the so-called whole of government approach to a just transition, which is key to the delivery on the ground. And just to note, of course, the Australian Net Zero Economy Authority, which engages with regional governments, the South African Presidential Climate Commission that includes mayors as their commissioners to make sure they're able to co-shape the decision on the direction of national and local policies. Now, as many of you know, at COP30, there was a landmark outcome to adopt the Just Transition mechanism, which was widely celebrated by many national governments, civil society, and workers. This year, what will happen is that parties will be negotiating on how to design and operationalize this mechanism. A draft decision is expected to be tabled in Bonn. The overarching goal of the mechanism is to enable just transition pathways. And as we've been demonstrating throughout the Just Transition Work Program process, it will be critical to engage with subnational governments from the outset in the process of designing the mechanism and in the mechanism itself, together, of course, with workers, civil society, and businesses and their constituencies within the UNFCCC. Now, in terms of what we are building from, at COP30, unfortunately, despite the strong support from many parties and them tabling that in the contact groups, and despite them highlighting that, for instance, in the Just Transition Ministerial, the subnational reference or a whole of government reference was omitted from the COP30 decision. However, there was a positive sign. The decision includes a mention of a whole of society approach and more broadly, a focus on inclusive processes and approaches to just transition pathways, which again is a very positive sign for us as a constituency. Another positive sign is that this year we've been seeing an increased number of the different submissions from national governments, but other partners as well, that highlight the critical role that subnational government play as just transition implementers. That two, that they should be engaged, subnational governments should be engaged in the mechanism as beneficiaries and as those who can contribute from the sort of local reality side. And thirdly, many national governments are also highlighting the need for an inclusive and participatory mechanism, which is, of course, key to us as a constituency and to other constituencies engaged actively in this process. Now, how does this translate to Bonn? We are aiming to engage actively in the negotiations under the Just Transition Work Program and track the process. We are planning to engage with national governments who have shown support for for our position and with whom we align very closely. And we are planning to engage with other constituencies, as noted, who are engaging in this process. Now, to end, I will share our Just Transition Mechanism submission that we put together as a constituency in March. And of course, as the process develops and as the negotiations develop, that position will likely need to be refined and adjusted. So, of course, very, very welcome this broader constituency inputs and insights on how best to take that forward. My email address will be included in that submission, so please do feel free to reach out. And then secondly, again, considering the wealth of experience and expertise of this constituency, would love to hear from folks who may have engaged actively with the Warsaw international mechanism or with the Santiago network or the technology mechanism, and to hear their insights on how these mechanisms and networks have engaged with subnationals. What are the lessons that we should learn from these mechanisms, and how we can apply them to our advocacy this year moving forward. So thank you very much. And I'll pop the submission in the chat box, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marta. And thank you for all the work that you've already accomplished this year. It's quite impressive. And now hopefully can be strengthened by the formal convening of the working group. So just paying attention a little bit to time, we'll move on to the next priority, but certainly if you have questions for Marta, pop them in the chat and we can return to them after we hear from Amelia, who's going to, Amelia Dearman, joining us from the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, serving on the LGMA Constituency Steering Committee, but also important in this context, one of the wonderful, along with Toby, one of the wonderful co-leaders of this thematic area last year, and is bringing this forward to us for Bonn in advance of the working group on this being convened. So Amelia, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And yes, I also wanted to give a shout out to Toby, who spoke earlier on Santa Marta, for his work on this agenda as well last year. So multi-level cooperation, this is really about the collaborations between different levels of government, how we can align local, regional and national actions to unlock faster, more ambitious emission reductions and improve resilience and adaptation. So we know that by working together across these different levels of government, we can go further, faster. And some national governments have, of course, recognised this valuable contribution. We heard from Leah earlier about the fantastic UNH report about the NDC content, and some of them are committed to multi-level partnership models through those NDCs or through other mechanisms. However, within the COP process, we really need to start moving beyond recognition for our sector to unlock further opportunities for implementation that local and national governments can deliver together. And we feel currently the international climate process isn't delivering this. So when we sort of acknowledged this last year, we made some really good efforts to try and secure a formal space for multi-level cooperative action within the COP process. And this really started a conversation with parties and amongst the constituency, but there were some challenges raised. So we feel from last year's work that what we need is a much more detailed proposal with stronger buy-in from our allies and also from negotiators. So for the SBs, what we would therefore like to do is try and begin to develop that detailed proposal for what a dialogue can deliver through consultation with subnational officials who will be participating and through the constituency, but also directly with national officials. We're hoping that through this sort of more consultative approach, we can build a shared understanding and ownership of this proposal to deliver a constructive, beneficial mechanism that can connect global goals to local realities. And we heard some exciting sort of models and approaches that are being taken through some voluntary mechanisms like the Santa Marta conference that Toby mentioned earlier. I think during the SBs, there's lots of existing dialogues that will be in the programme, such as the Oceans Dialogue and the Mountains Dialogue. So it'll be really good for us to kind of attend those as a constituency to really see how they function and what the kind of format is like. So my call to action today to the constituency is really to pick up this consultation, pick up this idea of discussing what could work well for both parties and for our constituency on the dialogue. And we have some supporting documents that we can make available to help with this. And please share your ideas as we all discuss throughout Bonn as well. And Laurence, that is a very good question about the connection with CHAMP. And Ariel, I can quickly pick up on that now, if that's okay.
Yep, please.
So CHAMP is a voluntary high ambition initiative. And what it is able to do is sit outside of the process. It sits kind of under the action agenda and is able to kind of go further faster. What we're looking at here is what parts of that could be brought into the official formal COP process. And I think CHAMP partners are, so CHAMP governments are really some of the parties we're looking to work with, given they are the higher ambition countries when it comes to multi-level governance. The difference is that, of course, yes, CHAMP is voluntary, and what we're seeking is something that is a kind of longer term mechanism for all parties.
Perfect. Thank you, Amelia. And yes, just to echo on that with the connections to CHAMP, I think we do, we're acknowledging that CHAMP itself also is going through kind of an evolution of its leadership with the new governance structure of a steering committee, which I believe will be announced at Bonn or maybe at the London Climate Action week, but then also the subnational group that is going to be attached to CHAMP, so a subnational advisory council. I think one role that LGMA could play there is to really empower those leaders who are meant to be advising, or at least bringing recommendations or reflections to the parties, that to make sure that they, are well connected to the LGMA and able to transfer some of these messages to CHAMP. So certainly see it as a supportive and complementary initiative. Just exactly as Amelia is saying, kind of this is where the two tiers actually come together again. So we see that. Yeah, and agreed, Laurence, the duplicative nature of things. We certainly don't want to be repetitive in any way, but really look at what are the opportunities to advance together, for sure. So looking forward, I just want to make sure we have enough time to touch on engagement opportunities for the greater constituency, both within the SBs and also beyond that. So there'll be a couple of points here that relate to these priorities that we've just heard shared. But first of all, I'm really looking at 4 different areas of priority for our engagements in the SBs. We, definitely as the constituency have lots of opportunities to make interventions, to be, in certain spaces within the blue zone. And so obviously making sure that we're well prepared with our priorities, kind of formulated in a way that can be shared in those opportunities that we have. We also will have bilateral meetings with the COP leadership and also looking to have meetings with parties, as Amelia was saying, to kind of do this consultative approach during the SB. So really looking at dialogue with the parties in a coordinated way. So Eunice had referred to the advocacy tracker that we've implemented. We'll be looking to use that tracker to make sure that the LGMA constituent members are kind of talking to each other about the kind of advocacy that we're doing together. I think my colleague is going to share the link to the agenda file that has a list of all of the different meetings and sessions that we're looking at right now. And then the other link that's shared there is our attendance tracker, which is another piece here that I really would love for for folks to, if you are going to be in Bonn, please share with us that you're going to be there. We tend to have on-the-ground communications, but I think also knowing who from the constituency is planning on being at the talks and when would be wonderful. So if you can take some time to share that or share it with colleagues who you know are attending and would be interested in following the LGMA, just so we can understand who we can reach out to on the ground and continue to connect as a constituency. Then going forward, looking more broadly beyond the SBs, so we probably will not gather together again as a constituency online like this until pre-COP. So I'll be looking at the dates for that. But in the meantime, the steering committee will be meeting, and very importantly, we will be convening our additional working groups. So as a reminder, our working groups are an incredibly important part of the constituency. You've just heard from the leadership of present leadership and past leadership of working groups. This is really the technical backbone of our work, and very, very important for us to be able to advance on our goals. So just as by means of an update, we have now convened the first 5 initial working groups on adaptation, climate finance, communications, just transition, and loss and damage. The leaders of those working groups have been onboarded as of yesterday, so very excited to start that work. If you expressed interest to be a part of one of those working groups, you will receive an email from me today introducing you to your working group leaders, and they will be kicking off the work with you. Some maybe even trying to advance a little bit before the SBs, if that's possible. The other key piece here is the additional working groups that we are going to convene. So we have identified 7 additional topics, both from the steering committee's priorities and then also from within the constituency. So thank you for those of you who participated in the working group terms of reference process where these topics were surfaced. Yeah, these 7 different working groups will be looking for co-leads or leads of the working groups, as well as participants. Maybe just one note that we do need to have leadership indicated for the working groups to be able to convene. So if you are really passionate about a topic, I would encourage you to apply as a co-lead. There's a relatively short deadline for this. So I've just sent out the notice yesterday. We'll send a broader notice via our newsletter on this, but the deadline for expressions, particularly for the co-leads, is next Friday. And I'm sorry this is such a short period of time, but we really do want to convene these working groups. If I can help you to make the decision of whether you want to express interest as a co-lead, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share my thoughts about kind of capacity and what it requires. Of course, the working group TOR hopefully also indicates to you what is required there to serve in the leadership position. The participation expression of interest form will continue to be open, so there is not as much of a pressure to, if you still within your organizations want to figure out who's applying to what or expressing interest to what, that will remain open for participants, and you'll see that you can also express your interest for any of the first 5 working groups as well, that remains open. So just to say, I definitely welcome your expressions of interest for this. We had tremendous response in the first round. More than 70 responses came through to make up a very robust first group of working groups, and I hope we'll see similar uptake for the second group of working groups. As a reminder, we have the LGMA coordination channels. Please, I think my colleague will share the links to this as well, but these are other ways to stay up to date with the constituency. And in our last minute here, I failed to put this in my slides. I'm going to do it for the afternoon, but there's an important other engagement process. It's not, officially related to the LGMA, but a very important process for us, and that's on the second order draft review, or the second draft review of the IPCC special report on climate change in cities, and that is a review process open to all. So, you do need to register for it, and there's some basic questions asked there. The registration period closes on June 26th. My colleague is going to share the news bit that ICLEI ran on this that has information about this review, but basically you can register to be a part of the review until June 26th, but comments need to be submitted by July 3rd. So it's a slightly shorter period to actually get access to the draft. But I would really recommend that if you if you're a part of this briefing, you should be interested in this report, and getting early access to it will help the authors to understand where the gaps continue to be and other issues that might come up with the varied expertise of the LGMA. I think that literally anyone on this call would have something to offer to this process. So please, I encourage you to submit your interest in that. I saw some responses about interest on the working groups already, so that's great. Please do use the form there. That's going to be how we'll track the interest. Maybe Matteo, you can pop that form one more time in the chat just so people have that as the last chat, the form to express your interest on the working groups. I know the slide says we welcome your questions, but actually it should say thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for our speakers. Wonderful. I see that Neil's still on the line. Thank you for joining us this whole time, Neil. I wish you best of luck with your preparations ahead of Istanbul next week. Amelia, Marta, Matteo, Kata, thank you for all of your wonderful interventions today and support. And we will see you in Bonn if you're going to be there, and at future briefings if you're not. So take care and have a great continuation of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.